Welcome to Legends at Midnight, where myths awaken when darkness falls. Tonight's tale is the epic Titanomachy Kronos versus Zeus and the rise of the Olympians. If you've already subscribed and left a like, let's begin. In the boundless darkness that once was, before light touched the world, there existed only chaos. A formless void where neither time nor space had meaning. From this primordial emptiness emerged the first beings, Gaia, the Earth Mother, whose body became the foundation of all lands, Tartarus, the deepest abyss, and Eros, the force of attraction that would bind all creation together. Gaia, alone in the vastness, brought forth Uranus, the starry sky, to be her companion and cover. Together they created the first children of the cosmos, the Titans, 12 in number, 6 male and 6 female. They were beings of tremendous power and majesty. Among them, none was more cunning or ambitious than Kronos, the youngest son, whose name would echo through eternity as both creator and destroyer. The Titans roamed the young earth, their footsteps carving valleys, their breath stirring the first winds. They were beautiful and terrible, their very existence a celebration of raw, untamed power. Yet Uranus, jealous and fearful of his own children's might, imprisoned his other offspring, the one-eyed Cyclopes and the hundred-handed Hecatonchires, in the darkness of Tartarus, where their anguished cries echoed unheard through the depths of creation. Gaia, wounded by her consort's cruelty, fashioned a great adamantine sickle from the bones of the earth. With sorrow weighing upon her heart, she approached her Titan children, seeking one brave enough to stand against their father. It was Kronos, with ambition burning in his eyes, who stepped forward and took the blade from his mother's hands. When night spread her veil across the world and Uranus descended to embrace Gaia, Kronos emerged from hiding. With one terrible swing of the adamantine sickle, he severed his father's generative power and cast the bloody remnants into the foaming sea. From these divine drops would later spring new life, new gods, new troubles, but that tale must wait, for now. As Uranus retreated to the distant heavens, his voice thundered a prophecy that would haunt Kronos through the ages. As you have done to me, so shall be done to you by your own child. The cycle cannot be broken. Remember my words when your throne crumbles beneath you. With Uranus banished, Kronos became lord of all creation. He took his sister Rhea as his queen, and together they established the first true reign of gods. The Age of Titans had begun, a golden time when immortals walked freely upon the earth, and the boundaries between realms remained fluid and undefined. Under Kronos' rule, order slowly emerged from primordial chaos. Mountains took their places, rivers carved their courses, forests spread their green canopies toward the sky. The Titans divided dominion among themselves. Oceanus claimed the waters that encircled the earth. Hyperion took charge of light and sun. Themis established the first laws. Mnemosyne became keeper of memory. Each found their purpose, their domain, their power. Yet Kronos, who had risen through violence, could never fully escape its shadow. The prophecy of Uranus haunted his dreams, turning sweet sleep bitter with visions of destruction and defeat. Each night, he would wake with a start, his immortal heart pounding with very mortal fear. A child, his child, would one day wield against him the same merciless justice he had visited upon his father. And so, when Rhea's belly first swelled with new life, Kronos watched with growing apprehension. When she gave birth to their first child, a daughter named Hestia, Kronos did not hesitate. Seizing the infant from her mother's exhausted arms, he opened his great maw and swallowed the child whole. Rhea's scream of anguish shook the foundations of creation. But Kronos remained unmoved. "It is necessary," he told his horrified queen. "No child of mine shall ever fulfill my father's curse." 5 times Rhea's body quickened with divine life. 5 times she endured the agony of birth. And 5 times she watched in helpless horror as Kronos devoured her children, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. each disappearing into the dark void of their father's belly, where they existed in a state neither living nor dead, conscious yet unable to grow or thrive. With each child lost, Rhea's grief hardened into resolve. The goddess who had once been gentle as morning dew now harbored thoughts as sharp as winter frost. When she felt the sixth child stirring within her womb, a son whose power she could sense even before his birth, she knew she could bear the cruelty no longer. In secret, Rhea fled to Crete, where ancient powers older even than the Titans still held sway. In a cave on Mount Dicte, hidden from Kronos' all-seeing gaze, she gave birth to Zeus, whose first cry caused flowers to bloom out of season, and whose infant hands grasped lightning that danced between his fingers. But when Kronos demanded to see his newest child, Rhea presented him not with the infant god, but with a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes. Blinded by his paranoia, Kronos did not pause to inspect the bundle before swallowing it whole, believing he had once again thwarted fate. Far from his father's cruel shadow, Zeus grew strong on Crete. The nymphs Adrastea and Ida tended him, feeding him on the milk of the divine goat Amalthea and the honey gathered by sacred bees. His cries were masked by the dancing Curetes, warrior spirits who clashed their spears against their shields to drown out the sound of the infant god's wails, lest Kronos hear and discover the deception. Years passed like moments for the immortals. Zeus grew not just in strength but in wisdom, tutored by Metis, daughter of Oceanus, whose name means cunning intelligence. She taught him the ways of strategy and foresight, the subtle arts that would prove as valuable as raw power in the struggles to come. As Zeus reached maturity, his divine nature blazed ever brighter. Storm clouds gathered when he frowned. Clear skies bloomed when he smiled. The young god looked out across the world ruled by his father and saw not the order Kronos proclaimed, but stagnation. Not peace, but silence enforced by fear. The time had come, he knew, to fulfill the prophecy that Kronos had tried so desperately to escape. With Metis' guidance, Zeus approached his father's court not as a rebel, but as a cupbearer. Unknown to Kronos, the wine he served was mixed with a powerful emetic herb that would force the Titan king to expel all he had swallowed. Kronos, who had never suspected that his overthrow would come not through force but through cunning, drank deeply from the offered cup. The effect was immediate and violent. Kronos doubled over on his obsidian throne, his body convulsing as he vomited forth first the stone that had been fed to him in Zeus' place, and then, one by one, the 5 elder children of Rhea. First Poseidon, then Hades, Hera, Demeter, and finally Hestia. Fully formed and perfect they emerged, having grown within the dark confines of their father's belly, nourished by his own divine essence. As his siblings stood blinking in the light they had been denied for so long, Zeus declared himself their liberator and rightful king. But Kronos, though weakened, was far from defeated. Drawing himself up to his full cosmic height, the Titan Lord summoned his brothers and sisters, calling them to defend the old order against this upstart generation. Thus began the great conflict that would reshape the cosmos, the Titanomachy. The war of old gods against new, of father against children, of established power against revolutionary change. It was not merely a struggle for dominion, but a battle that would determine the very nature of existence for all that would follow. The lines were drawn not strictly by generation, but by conviction and choice. Most Titans stood with Kronos, mighty Atlas, whose strength was unmatched, clever Prometheus and Epimetheus, sons of Iapetus, Menoetius the Violent, and many others whose names are now forgotten whispers in the void. Yet some Titans chose to ally with the young Olympians, Themis and Mnemosyne, who valued justice and truth above family loyalty. And most importantly, Oceanus, eldest of the Titans, who remained neutral, unwilling to raise his hand against either his brother or his brother's children. Zeus did not face this array of cosmic power alone. Besides his 5 siblings rescued from Kronos' belly, he traveled to the depths of Tartarus where, fulfilling a promise Gaia had made long ago, he freed the Cyclopes and Hecatonchires from their prison. Grateful for their liberation, the one-eyed smiths forged for Zeus his thunderbolts, for Poseidon his storm-raising trident, and for Hades a helmet that made its wearer invisible. The hundred-handed giants pledged their strength to the Olympian cause, each capable of hurling 100 mountain-sized boulders at once. Thus equipped and allied, Zeus and his siblings declared open war against the Titans. The opening clash of their conflict split the sky with light that had never before existed. Where divine weapons met divine flesh, new elements were created. The blood of immortals seeped into the earth, giving birth to strange and monstrous creatures. Mountains were used as missiles. Islands rose and sank as gods stepped upon them in battle. For 10 full years, the war raged without clear victory for either side. The Titans, led by Kronos, had the advantage of size and established power. They could tear open chasms in the earth with their hands and cause the seas to boil with their breath. When Atlas hurled a mountain, continents trembled at its impact. When Kronos wielded his scythe, reality itself seemed to part before its edge. Yet the Olympians fought with the desperate energy of the oppressed. Zeus' thunderbolts, white-hot shafts of concentrated energy, could pierce even the immortal flesh of Titans. Poseidon's trident stirred earthquakes and tidal waves that undermined his enemy's footing. Hades, wrapped in the cloak of invisibility gifted by the Cyclopes, struck unseen, spreading terror through the Titan ranks. The conflict was not limited to physical blows. Métis devised strategies that confounded the straightforward might of the Titans. Dreams were weaponized, illusions deployed. The very nature of time and space manipulated by these new gods who understood that power alone was not enough to win a cosmic struggle. Perhaps the most terrible weapons in this war were the hecatonchyres, Cottus, Briareus, and Gyges. With their 100 arms each, they could hurl volleys of mountains that blotted out the sky. The Titans, for all their might, found themselves buried under ranges of stone, pressed down by weight that even their strength could not immediately cast off. As the war progressed, its scope expanded beyond the physical plane. The very concepts that would define reality were at stake. Kronos and his generation represented cyclical time, the endless return of the same, the consuming maw that devoured all new things to maintain eternal sameness. Zeus and the Olympians fought for linear progression, for change, for the possibility of genuine novelty in the cosmos. The pivotal battle came on the slopes of Mount Olympus, the Titan stronghold that mirrored the Olympian seat of Mount Olympus. Zeus, wielding thunderbolts that split the sky into jagged wounds of light, confronted Kronos directly. Around them, the lesser combatants paused as if by unspoken agreement, sensing that the true resolution would come from this father-son confrontation. "You seek to overthrow the natural order," Kronos accused, his voice rumbling like continents in collision. "I seek to establish a new order," Zeus replied, electricity crackling around his divine form. "One where children need not fear being devoured by their father's ambition." Their clash sent shockwaves across creation. Where they met, neither advanced nor retreated for what might have been days or centuries. Time itself was unstable in the presence of such power. But gradually, the younger god's strength and will began to prevail. Zeus, born of a new age and unburdened by the weight of establishment, pressed his advantage. With a final, terrible bolt of lightning that temporarily blinded all who witnessed it, he struck Kronos down. The defeat of their leader broke the Titans' unified resistance. One by one they were overcome by force, by guile, or by exhaustion. The Olympians, though bloodied and weary, stood triumphant amid the ruins of the old cosmos, ready to shape a new one in their image. Zeus, showing both mercy and pragmatism, did not destroy the defeated Titans utterly. Most were bound and imprisoned in Tartarus, guarded by the vigilant hecatonchyres. Atlas, who had been Kronos' most powerful lieutenant, received a special punishment. He was condemned to stand at the western edge of the world and hold the sky upon his shoulders for eternity, replacing the function that Uranus had once served willingly. Kronos himself was not killed, for true immortals cannot die in the mortal sense, but was cast into the deepest region of Tartarus, where he would sleep the dreamless sleep of the dethroned divine, or as some tales tell, was exiled to the blessed realm of Elysium, where he rules over the spirits of the Golden Age. A few titans were spared punishment. Those who had remained neutral, like Oceanus, were permitted to retain their ancient dominions under Olympian sovereignty. Those who had sided with Zeus, Prometheus, Epimetheus, Themis, and Mnemosyne among them, were welcomed into the new order, though their status would never quite equal that of the Olympian gods themselves. With victory secured, Zeus divided the cosmos between himself and his brothers. The sky and heavens he claimed as his own domain, from which he would rule as king of gods and men. To Poseidon he granted the seas and waters, a realm vast and powerful in its own right. To Hades went the underworld, the dominion of the dead, feared by mortals but essential to the cosmic balance. The earth itself, they agreed, would be neutral territory, shared by all and special dominion of none, though Zeus would maintain overall authority as king. The goddesses too assumed their roles in the new divine order. Hera eventually became Zeus' queen, though their marriage would be neither smooth nor entirely faithful. Demeter took governance of agriculture and the seasonal cycles that would feed humanity. Hestia, eldest and most peaceable of the siblings, claimed the hearth and home as her province, becoming the center of family life and devotional practice. Thus was established the reign of the Olympians, a divine hierarchy that would persist through countless human generations. Unlike the remote, abstract rule of the Titans, these new gods would involve themselves intimately in mortal affairs, for better and worse. They would love, fight, punish, reward, and transform the human world according to their passions and plans. But the victory, complete as it seemed, carried within it the seeds of future conflict. For Zeus, having overthrown his father as his father had overthrown Uranus before him, now lived with the same fear that had driven Kronos to his terrible acts. Would he too be overthrown by his child? The cycle of divine succession, broken for now, still lingered as possibility and threat. And not all the children of the Titans accepted their parents' defeat with grace. Giants would rise. Monsters would emerge. Old powers would stir in the depths of the world, challenging the Olympian order. The greatest war was won, but many battles remained to be fought before the cosmos as we know it would find its stable form. Yet that is how the age of the Titans gave way to the age of the Olympians. Through violence and vision, through suffering and strategy, the world was transformed. And in that transformation, the possibility of human history emerged, for only after the Titanomachy was the stage set for the creation and development of mortal life as we understand it. The echoes of that cosmic conflict still reverberate through our world. When thunder cracks overhead, some say it is Zeus remembering his victory. When the earth trembles and splits, perhaps it is the Titans, stirring in their deep imprisonment. And when we humans dream of overthrowing established powers and creating new possibilities, we reenact in our small way the pattern set by the greatest revolution the cosmos has ever known. This is the legacy of the Titanomachy, not merely a tale of gods and monsters, but a template for change itself, written in the very fabric of existence. In the aftermath of the Great War, as the cosmos settled into its new configuration under Olympian rule, Zeus faced the monumental task of establishing a stable divine government. The universe, still raw and malleable from the conflict that had reshaped it, required careful management. Unlike Kronos, whose reign had been maintained through fear and suppression, Zeus understood that lasting power required both strength and legitimacy. From the gleaming heights of Mount Olympus, a peak that reached beyond the clouds and touched the very ether, Zeus summoned his family and allies to council. Thrones were arranged in a great circle, each reflecting the nature and domain of its divine occupant. Zeus' own seat was crafted of gold and platinum, inlaid with thunderbolts of diamond and sapphire. When he took his place upon it, the very air hummed with barely contained power. "We have won a great victory," Zeus addressed the assembled immortals, his voice carrying the lingering resonance of thunder. But victory alone does not create order. Together, we must now build what will endure. Despite their triumph, the scars of battle remained fresh upon the gods. Poseidon's trident still bore the dents from striking Titan flesh. Hades' face was half in shadow, having grown accustomed to the concealment of his helmet of invisibility. Hera, regal and proud, displayed wounds that gleamed with ichor, the golden blood of immortals, not yet fully healed. The Titans ruled through dominance alone, Zeus continued. Their world was stagnant, unchanging. Ours shall be different. We will create, not merely preserve. We will inspire, not only command. And most importantly, we will establish a covenant with those beings who shall come after us. For the first time, Zeus spoke openly of his vision for mortal life, creatures of flesh and spirit who would inhabit the world, living brief but brilliant lives, offering worship to the gods who would in turn provide them with divine guidance. This revelation was met with mixed reactions among the Olympians. "Why create beings designed to die?" questioned Hades, who had already begun constructing his subterranean realm for the containment of souls. "Their existence seems cruel by design." "Because through limitation comes meaning," answered Zeus, "and through mortality comes urgency and purpose. They will accomplish in their brief spans what we, in our eternal leisure, might never attempt." While this philosophical debate continued among the gods, practical matters of cosmic governance required attention. The defeated Titans, though imprisoned, remained powerful entities whose complete destruction was neither possible nor desirable for the cosmic balance. The Hecatonchires, Cottus, Briareus, and Gyges, were appointed as eternal jailers, their 100 hands ensuring no Titan could escape their bonds. Tartarus itself was reinforced as a prison realm, surrounded by a bronze wall and threefold layers of night. Its entrance was guarded by a forbidding gate that responded only to Olympian command. Within this cosmic penitentiary, the Titans would remain, not dead, for true immortals cannot die, but removed from the affairs of the world they had once ruled. Yet even as these security measures were implemented, Zeus demonstrated a political acumen his father had lacked. He recognized that perpetual punishment created only perpetual enemies. Selected Titans who had not directly opposed him, or had even supported his cause, were integrated into the new divine order. Themis, Titaness of divine law and order, became an advisor to Zeus himself, helping establish the foundations of cosmic justice. Mnemosyne, keeper of memory, would later become mother to the 9 muses who inspired mortal creativity. Prometheus and Epimetheus, sons of the Titan Iapetus, were entrusted with the crucial task of populating the earth with living creatures, a responsibility whose complications would later generate their own legends and tragedies. Perhaps most significantly, Zeus took multiple Titan consorts in the early days of his reign, not merely from passion, though that was never absent in Zeus' nature, but as political unions that helped heal the wounds of war. With Métis, his chief strategist during the Titanomachy, he conceived Athena, goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare. With Themis, he fathered the Ori, the seasons, and the Moirai, the fates. With the Titaness Leto, he would later father the divine twins Apollo and Artemis. These unions served multiple purposes. They created bridges between the old order and the new. They produced deities whose hybrid heritage gave them unique perspectives and powers. And they demonstrated Zeus' commitment to incorporation rather than mere suppression of the cosmic past. This is not to suggest that the early reign of Zeus was without conflict. The transition from Titan to Olympian supremacy generated aftershocks throughout creation. Monsters born of Gaia's anger at the treatment of her Titan children emerged to challenge the new gods. Giants rose in rebellion. Ancient chthonic powers that predated even the Titans stirred in the depths, uncomfortable with the new celestial orientation of divine power. Most dangerous was the emergence of Typhon, the most terrible offspring of Gaia and Tartarus. Enraged by the defeat of the Titans, Gaia had conceived this monster specifically to challenge Zeus' authority. Typhon was a creature of nightmare, taller than mountains, with 100 dragon heads that breathed fire and spoke the languages of all animals and monsters. From the waist down, writhing vipers formed his legs, and his arms could stretch to encompass east and west when fully extended. When Typhon attacked Olympus, many gods fled in terror, transforming themselves into animals to escape the monster's notice. Only Zeus stood firm, meeting the creature in a battle that reshaped continents. Mountains were uprooted. Islands sank beneath the sea. New lands rose from the depths as the combatants grappled across the face of the earth. At one point, Typhon managed to sever the tendons from Zeus' hands and feet, temporarily crippling the king of gods. Were it not for the intervention of Hermes and Pan, who retrieved and restored these vital parts, Olympian rule might have ended almost as soon as it began. But Zeus recovered, and with renewed strength, he buried Typhon beneath Mount Etna, where the monster's fiery breath and frustrated movements still cause eruptions and earthquakes. This victory over Typhon consolidated Zeus' position as undisputed sovereign of the cosmos. Having defeated both his father's generation and the worst monster Gaia could produce, his authority was now beyond challenge, at least from outside the Olympian circle itself. Within that circle, however, the dynamics remained complex. Zeus' siblings had not fought beside him merely to exchange one absolute monarch for another. They expected and received significant autonomy in their respective domains. Poseidon ruled the seas with nearly complete independence, building his underwater palace and creating his own divine court. Hades, though rarely welcomed on Olympus itself, exercised unquestioned authority in his subterranean kingdom. Zeus understood that this division of powers was not a diminishment of his kingship but its stabilizing force. Unlike Kronos, who had sought to consume all potential rivals, Zeus created a cosmic order in which multiple divine wills operated in dynamic tension, creating a balance more resilient than any single authority could maintain. This approach extended beyond his siblings to the next generation of gods as well. As Zeus' children by various consorts reached maturity, they too were granted domains and powers appropriate to their natures. Apollo received governance of light, music, prophecy, and healing. Artemis took the wild places, the moon, and the protection of young creatures. Athena emerged fully formed from Zeus' head, after he had swallowed her pregnant mother Metis, to become goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare. Each of these younger gods received not merely a conceptual portfolio but actual authority within the divine hierarchy. They could act independently within their spheres, issue commands that carried cosmic weight, and develop their own relationships with mortal worship and natural forces. This distribution of power prevented any single entity, even Zeus himself, from exerting total control over all aspects of existence. The Olympian system thus established was neither a pure monarchy nor a true democracy, but a complex hierarchy in which authority was both centralized and distributed. Zeus remained the final arbiter in cosmic disputes, the wielder of the most fearsome divine weapons, and the figure to whom even other gods paid homage. Yet his rule operated through consensus as much as command, requiring the willing participation of a diverse divine community. This political arrangement was mirrored in the physical architecture of divine spaces. Mount Olympus became the celestial capital of the cosmos, its gleaming palaces arranged to reflect the status and relationships of their divine occupants. Zeus and Hera occupied the central and highest palace, symbolizing their role as king and queen. Around them, in descending order of prominence, stood the homes of the other major gods. The layout was not merely residential but functional. A great circular hall provided space for divine councils where cosmic policies were debated and determined. Gardens of immortality, where ambrosia and nectar were cultivated, ensured the gods' eternal youth and vigor. Workshops for divine craftsmen, observatories for monitoring the mortal realm, and treasuries for storing cosmic energies completed this celestial complex. Yet Olympus was not the only divine residence. Poseidon's underwater palace rivaled Olympus in splendor, crafted from coral, pearl, and enchanted ice that never melted. Hades' subterranean kingdom contained its own dark majesty, with rivers of mystical property defining its boundaries and regions allocated for different categories of the dead. Lesser gods maintained their own sacred spaces throughout creation, in groves and springs, in mountain passes and ocean depths, at crossroads and hearths. This decentralized divine geography reflected the Olympian approach to governance, unified yet diverse, hierarchical yet distributed. No single location contained all divine power, just as no single deity controlled all cosmic functions. The result was a pantheon that could bend without breaking, adapt without losing its essential nature. As the dust of creation settled and the wounds of war healed, Zeus turned his attention to the matter of mortal life. The earth, now structured according to Olympian design, awaited inhabitants who would both benefit from and contribute to the cosmic order. This task of creation was delegated to the Titan brothers Prometheus and Epimetheus, whose names signify forethought and afterthought respectively. Epimetheus, working with enthusiastic haste, distributed gifts and qualities to the animals, speed to some, strength to others, protective coverings or specialized abilities to still others. So absorbed was he in this creative process that by the time he reached humankind, his store of gifts was exhausted. Humans stood naked and vulnerable, lacking fur for warmth, claws for defense, wings for escape, or any specialized advantage for survival. Seeing his brother's error, Prometheus determined to compensate by providing humans with divine fire, not merely physical flame, but the fire of consciousness, creativity, and technological capacity. This gift, stolen from the hearth of Olympus itself, would allow mortals to transcend their physical limitations through ingenuity and collaboration. The theft of fire was both a genuine crime against Olympian order and a metaphorical representation of humanity's unique relationship to the gods. By possessing divine fire, humans gained the ability to shape their world rather than merely inhabit it. They could cook food, forge metals, create art, and eventually build civilizations, all activities that mimic divine creation on a smaller scale. Zeus' reaction to Prometheus' theft was complex. As upholder of cosmic law, he could not allow such a transgression to go unpunished. Yet as architect of a world in which mortals played an integral role, he recognized the necessity of human advancement. His solution was characteristically nuanced. Prometheus would suffer for his crime, chained to a mountain where an eagle devoured his ever-regenerating liver, but the gift of fire would remain with humanity. This pattern of divine punishment coupled with tacit permission would characterize much of the Olympians' relationship with humanity. The gods enforced cosmic boundaries through dramatic examples while simultaneously allowing mortal development to proceed. It was a form of parenting on a cosmic scale, establishing firm limits while encouraging growth within those parameters. The creation of woman, specifically Pandora in most versions of the myth, followed a similar pattern. Fashioned by Hephaestus on Zeus' command and endowed with gifts by all the gods, she was both blessing and subtle punishment for mankind. Her curiosity, or perhaps purpose, depending on the telling, led her to open the infamous jar or box, releasing troubles into the human world, but also preserving hope as the final, most ambiguous gift. With these foundations in place, the Titans imprisoned or assimilated, the Olympian hierarchy established, and mortal life developing on Earth, the cosmos entered a period of relative stability. This was the mythic golden age from which our oldest stories emerge, a time when gods walked freely among mortals, when heroes could be sired by divine parents, and when the boundaries between human and divine were more permeable than they would later become. During this era, individual gods began developing their unique relationships with mortal worship and culture. Temples rose, dedicated to specific deities and maintained by priests who learned the proper rituals and offerings. Divine favor could be sought through prayer, sacrifice, and adherence to the particular codes associated with each god. Disrespect or neglect could bring divine wrath, often tailored to the nature of the offended deity. Poseidon punished insignificance with storms and floods. Apollo sent plagues or struck offenders with his silver arrows. Artemis protected her sacred animals and punished those who harmed them. Athena withdrew her wisdom from foolish cities. Zeus himself, as guardian of oaths and proper governance, struck with lightning those who violated sacred principles of hospitality or justice. Yet divine punishment was balanced by divine blessing. Cities that honored their patron deities received protection and prosperity. Individuals who demonstrated exceptional piety might receive visions, guidance, or material rewards. And in rare cases, mortals of outstanding virtue or ability might be elevated after death to semi-divine status, becoming heroes worthy of worship in their own right. This system of reciprocal relationship between gods and mortals reflected the larger cosmic balance the Olympians had established. Unlike the remote Titans, whose interaction with lesser beings had been minimal, the Olympian gods created a universe in which every level of existence was connected to every other. Divine power flowed downward in the form of blessings, punishments, and interventions. Mortal worship flowed upward in the form of sacrifices, temples, and devotional practices. The result was a cosmos more dynamic than what had existed under Titanic rule. Change became possible. Evolution, spiritual, cultural, even physical, was incorporated into the structure of reality. The cycles of nature were maintained not through rigid repetition but through seasonal death and rebirth overseen by gods who themselves had experienced transformation. This cosmic dynamism reached its most explicit expression in the myths of divine transformation. Zeus, in pursuit of various loves, took the forms of bull, swan, shower of gold, or eagle. Demeter, mourning her daughter Persephone, appeared as an old woman. Apollo and Artemis could manifest as their sacred animals, the wolf and the deer. These changes were not merely disguises but expressions of the gods' capacity to transcend fixed identity without losing their essential nature. Similarly, the Olympians oversaw transformations in the mortal realm. Humans could be changed into animals, plants, or geographical features as punishment or protection. The huntsman Actaeon, having accidentally glimpsed Artemis bathing, was transformed into a stag and torn apart by his own hounds. The nymph Daphne, fleeing Apollo's unwanted advances, became a laurel tree at the moment of capture. These myths reinforced the understanding that form was fluid in an Olympian cosmos, that boundaries could be crossed, and that identity extended beyond physical manifestation. The most significant boundaries, however, remained intact. Mortals, save in the rarest circumstances, remained mortal. Gods, despite their transformations and adventures in the human realm, remained divine. And the generational succession that had defined cosmic history, Uranus overthrown by Kronos, Kronos by Zeus, appeared to have been arrested. Zeus had established a divine order capable of evolving without fundamental revolution. This stability was reinforced by Zeus' approach to potential threats to his rule. Having learned from his father's mistakes, he did not attempt to eliminate all possible rivals, but instead incorporated them into his regime. When prophecy suggested that his union with the sea goddess Thetis would produce a son greater than his father, Zeus arranged for her marriage to the mortal hero Peleus instead. Their son Achilles would indeed be mighty, but as a mortal hero rather than a divine usurper. Similarly, when Zeus' first wife Metis was prophesied to bear children who might challenge him, he swallowed her while she was pregnant with Athena. But unlike Kronos, who had swallowed his children out of fear and kept them imprisoned, Zeus later released Athena, allowing her to emerge fully formed from his head. She became not his rival but his closest ally, often serving as the embodiment of his wisdom and strategic thought. These episodes reveal Zeus' political genius. Rather than fighting unavoidable change, he managed it. Rather than suppressing potential rivals, he transformed them into supporters. The result was an Olympian order that could incorporate new elements without losing its fundamental structure. a divine regime resistant to the revolutionary cycle that had defined previous cosmic epochs. Yet no system, however well-designed, exists without internal tensions. As the age of direct divine-mortal interaction began to wane, giving way to what we would recognize as historical time, the Olympian gods faced challenges both subtle and profound. One such challenge emerged from the gods' own nature. Having overthrown their predecessors in the name of freedom and progress, they now found themselves in the position of conservatives, maintaining a status quo against innovative forces. Having championed change, they became invested in stability. This contradiction generated tensions within divine policy and behavior that play out across the corpus of Greek mythology. We see it in the story of Prometheus, the Titan who had supported Zeus yet later defied him on behalf of humanity. We see it in the complex portrayal of Apollo, god of both civilization and wildness, of rational order and ecstatic prophecy. We see it perhaps most clearly in the myths surrounding Dionysus, the latecomer to the Olympian Council, whose worship involved liberation from social constraints and temporary return to primal chaos, a controlled revolution sanctioned by the very powers it appeared to challenge. Another tension arose from the gods' relationships with mortals. Having created humanity and established worship patterns that encouraged mortal devotion, the Olympians found themselves increasingly invested in human affairs. Their interventions, sending dreams, manifesting in disguise, answering prayers, punishing transgressions, required ever more divine attention and energy. Yet too much involvement threatened to disrupt the very mortal development they had established as a cosmic principle. The solution emerged gradually as direct divine intervention gave way to more mediated forms of interaction. Oracles, particularly those of Apollo at places like Delphi, became primary channels for divine communication. Professional priesthoods developed to maintain temples and interpret the god's will. Heroes and demigods, the offspring of divine mortal unions, served as intermediaries between realms, capable of understanding both mortal limitations and divine imperatives. These developments allowed the gods to maintain their connection to humanity while creating space for mortal self-determination. The Olympians increasingly operated through suggestion and inspiration rather than direct command, through subtle influence rather than overwhelming presence. Their power remained absolute, but its expression became more refined, more attuned to the complex interplay of free will and divine plan. This evolution of divine-mortal relations paralleled changes within the Olympian hierarchy itself. As time progressed, the sharp distinctions that had initially defined the gods' domains began to blur at the edges. Zeus, primarily a sky god, also came to be associated with justice, hospitality, and the protection of suppliants. Athena, originally a war goddess, expanded her purview to include crafts, wisdom, and strategic planning. Apollo accumulated responsibilities for music, prophecy, healing, archery, and youth. This accumulation and overlap of divine portfolios reflected the increasing complexity of the cosmos under Olympian management. As creation matured, as mortal civilizations developed, as the interactions between divine, human, and natural realms multiplied, the gods themselves evolved to comprehend and guide these developments. Their identities remained distinct but grew richer, more nuanced, more capable of addressing the expanding range of cosmic phenomena. The flexibility of the Olympian system is perhaps most evident in its capacity to assimilate new deities over time. Unlike the closed pantheon of the Titans, the Olympian order proved capable of incorporating divine figures who arose after the initial establishment of Zeus' reign. Dionysus, born to Zeus and the mortal woman Semele long after the Titanomachy, eventually received a place among the 12 major gods despite initial resistance. Asclepius, originally a mortal physician, was elevated to divine status as god of medicine following his death. Heracles, the greatest of heroes, was welcomed to Olympus after his mortal life ended, becoming a god rather than merely a shade in the underworld. These additions to the divine community demonstrate the Olympian capacity for evolution without revolution. New powers could be recognized and integrated rather than suppressed or destroyed. The cosmic hierarchy expanded to accommodate emerging forces rather than rigidly excluding them. This adaptability helped the Olympian system endure far longer than the regimes of Uranus or Kronos had managed. Despite this stability, or perhaps because of it, the Olympian gods occasionally found themselves challenged not from within their ranks but from outside the divine sphere entirely. As mortal civilizations grew in sophistication, as human thought developed philosophical and ethical dimensions, questions arose about the nature and legitimacy of divine governance. The epic poem known as Prometheus Bound, attributed to Aeschylus though possibly written by another hand, presents perhaps the most explicit challenge to Zeus' authority in classical literature. The chained Titan accuses Zeus of ruling arbitrarily and cruelly, promising that the king of gods will eventually need Prometheus' knowledge to avoid being overthrown in turn. The resolution of this confrontation is lost to us. The sequel plays have not survived, but the mere articulation of such critique within a cultural tradition that venerated the gods reveals the complexity of Greek attitudes toward divine power. Similarly, the character of Pentheus in Euripides the Bacchae resists the worship of Dionysus, refusing to acknowledge the god's divinity and prohibiting his rites in Thebes. Though Pentheus is ultimately destroyed for his impiety, the play explores genuine questions about the relationship between human governance and divine demand, between rational order and ecstatic release. The fact that such questions could be publicly performed in a society that maintained temple worship indicates the sophisticated balance Greek culture had developed between devotion and inquiry. This balance characterized the mature Olympian age, a cosmos in which divine power remained absolute but not unquestioned, in which moral complexities were acknowledged without undermining religious practice, in which the gods could be both worshipped as perfect and portrayed in art and literature as all too humanly flawed. It was a theological system that encouraged both piety and philosophy, both reverence and reason. The endurance of this system through centuries of Mediterranean history, surviving political changes from monarchy to democracy to empire, absorbing influences from Egypt, Persia, and beyond, evolving without losing its essential character, testifies to the success of Zeus' cosmic settlement after the Titanomachy. Where the reign of Kronos had lasted a single generation before collapsing under its own rigidity, the Olympian regime established by Zeus proved resilient across millennia of human experience. Eventually, of course, historical forces would overwhelm even this divine system. The rise of monotheistic religions, the philosophical critiques developed in late antiquity, the political transitions that removed state support from temple worship, all these factors contributed to the decline of Olympian influence in the Mediterranean world. By the time the Byzantine Emperor Justinian closed the last philosophical schools in Athens in 529 CE, official veneration of the Olympian gods had largely ceased throughout what had been their heartland. Yet even as formal worship faded, the myths of the Titanomachy and its aftermath retained their cultural power. Through literature, art, philosophy, and eventually psychology, the story of cosmic overthrow and divine establishment continued to shape human understanding across cultures and centuries. These narratives provided frameworks for comprehending revolution and stability, for exploring the tensions between authority and freedom, for examining the complex relationship between creative and destructive forces. In this sense, the legacy of the Titanomachy extends far beyond its role as creation myth or theological explanation. It becomes a lens through which human societies have repeatedly examined their own struggles with power, their own experiences of change and continuity, their own relationship to forces that seem both essential to existence and potentially threatening to it. When modern readers encounter the story of Kronos devouring his children and Zeus leading rebellion against his father, they are engaging not merely with ancient religion but with archetypal patterns that continue to manifest in human experience. The overthrow of oppressive systems, the establishment of more equitable governance, the balance between central authority and distributed power, these themes resonate across time because they address fundamental questions of collective life. Similarly, the Olympian settlement after victory, the decision to imprison rather than destroy most opponents, the integration of former enemies into the new order, the distribution of power across multiple centers, offers a model of post-revolutionary governance that contrasts instructively with historical examples of more absolutist approaches. Zeus' political acumen in consolidating power without becoming a mirror image of his tyrannical father provides material for reflection on the perennial challenge of achieving change without merely recreating the systems being replaced. The cosmic war between Titans and Olympians also illuminates the human relationship with time and change. The Titans, children of primordial forces and themselves representing elemental powers, embody the impersonal, cyclical processes of nature. The Olympians, more anthropomorphic and psychologically complex, represent a more historical, linear conception of time in which genuine novelty and progress become possible. Their conflict thus dramatizes a fundamental tension in human experience, between immersion in natural cycles and striving for transformative change. Perhaps most significantly, the myths surrounding the Titanomachy and the establishment of Olympian rule explore the relationship between divine power and mortal vulnerability. Zeus defeats the Titans not merely through superior strength but through alliance with the previously marginalized. His siblings freed from Kronos' belly, the Cyclopes and Hecatonchires released from Tartarus. This victory of coalition over isolated might suggest that even cosmic authority requires forms of consent and cooperation, that power shared can prove stronger than power hoarded. This insight takes concrete form in the divine-mortal relationship that develops after the Olympian victory. Unlike the remote Titans, the Olympian gods establish direct connections with humanity, accepting worship and offering protection within specific domains. This mutual relationship, gods providing cosmic order and specific blessings, mortals providing recognition and devotional attention, creates a model of interdependence that acknowledges differences in power without eliminating the agency of the less powerful party. Such theological negotiations between divine omnipotence and human freedom would continue to shape religious thought long after the Olympian gods ceased to receive widespread worship. The questions raised in Greek myth, how perfect beings might interact with imperfect ones, how eternal powers might relate to temporal existence, how divine justice might accommodate mortal error, would be taken up by subsequent religious traditions in new forms and frameworks. Even the physical imagery of the Titanomachy would prove enduringly powerful. The vision of cosmic warfare, mountains used as weapons, the earth itself split open, divine blood creating new forms of life, established a vocabulary of apocalyptic imagination that would influence everything from biblical eschatology to modern science fiction. When contemporary narratives portray world-ending conflicts or reality-altering battles, they draw on visual and conceptual language that traces back to these ancient cosmic struggles. Despite this rich legacy, it is important to remember that the myths themselves were never static or uniformly interpreted even in their own time. Different Greek cities emphasized different aspects of the Titanomachy narrative. Poets and playwrights revised details to highlight particular themes or address contemporary concerns. Philosophers allegorized the stories to extract ethical or metaphysical meaning beyond literal divine conflict. This multiplicity of interpretation was not a weakness of Greek religious tradition but one of its strengths. By maintaining flexibility in narrative without abandoning core symbolic structures, the myths could evolve alongside the societies that preserved them. They could address new questions while maintaining connection to ancient wisdom. They could accommodate increasing philosophical sophistication without losing their emotional and cultural resonance. In this respect, the Olympian approach to cosmic governance mirrored the Greek approach to mythic tradition itself, establishing stable frameworks within which creative variation could flourish. The divine hierarchy under Zeus provided consistent cosmic infrastructure while allowing significant autonomy to individual deities. Similarly, Greek religious culture maintained core mythic patterns while permitting substantial artistic and intellectual elaboration within those patterns. This combination of stability and flexibility helps explain why the myths of the Titanomachy and its aftermath have remained culturally productive for millennia after their original religious context faded. Unlike rigid dogmatic systems that struggle to accommodate changing social and intellectual conditions, the Greek mythic tradition established principles and patterns adaptable enough to retain meaning across radical cultural transitions. When Renaissance artists depicted scenes from the Titanomachy, when Romantic poets invoked the imprisoned Titans, when modern psychologists referenced the Kronos-Zeus conflict as a pattern of generational struggle, they were not merely recycling ancient material but activating its latent capacity to illuminate new circumstances. The myths proved capable of this ongoing reinterpretation precisely because they had originally been constructed to accommodate multiple levels of meaning and perspective. Perhaps the most profound aspect of the Titanomachy narrative is its suggestion that the cosmos itself evolves, that reality has a history rather than merely an eternal structure. By portraying multiple divine regimes, the primordial forces followed by the Titans followed by the Olympians, the Greek mythic tradition presented a universe in which fundamental change was possible, in which the basic conditions of existence could be transformed through conflict and resolution. This mythic insight resonates with modern scientific understanding of cosmic and biological evolution, with philosophical conceptions of historical development, and with political recognitions of social change over time. While the specific mechanisms imagined differ dramatically from contemporary models, the fundamental recognition that reality has a developmental history rather than merely an eternal order represents a crucial conceptual achievement. The Titanomachy thus stands as one of humanity's earliest and most elaborate attempts to comprehend cosmic order as the product of process rather than as simply given or eternal. In the violent overthrow of one divine generation by another, Greek mythology articulated the difficult but essential understanding that creation involves destruction, that new possibilities require the ending of old certainties, that birth and death are cosmically as well as individually linked. This recognition does not trivialize the suffering involved in such transitions. The myths portray cosmic violence in vivid, often disturbing detail: the castration of Uranus, the imprisonment of the Cyclopes, the devouring of divine children, the chaining of Prometheus. These images acknowledge the genuine trauma that accompanies transformative change, the real losses that offset even necessary gains. They refuse easy optimism while still affirming the possibility of progress. In this balance between recognizing pain and affirming possibility, the Titanomachy narrative achieves a maturity of vision that continues to offer wisdom in our own time of accelerating change and disruption. It suggests that progress is neither impossible nor inevitable, that new orders emerge through struggle rather than divine fiat, and that understanding our cosmic past is essential for shaping our collective future. As with all mythic narratives, the value of the Titanomachy lies not in its literal accuracy as cosmic history but in its capacity to organize human experience into meaningful patterns. Whether we approach these ancient stories as cultural heritage, as psychological insight, as philosophical framework, or simply as compelling narrative, they continue to offer resources for navigating our own relationship to power, change, and cosmic order. In the silence of night, when thunder echoes across distant hills, perhaps something in us still recognizes the voice of Zeus, victorious yet vigilant, maintaining the cosmic settlement that emerged from the greatest war creation has ever known. And in moments of revolutionary change or upheaval, perhaps we still sense the stirring of the Titans, reminding us that no order, however well established, stands beyond all challenge or transformation. Such mythic resonances connect us not merely to ancient Greek culture, but to fundamental human experiences of cosmic wonder, social order, generational conflict, and historical change. They speak to persistent questions about authority and freedom, stability and progress, violence and justice that no society has fully resolved. In this sense, the Titanomachy remains not just a story about the distant divine past but a resource for ongoing human reflection on our cosmic present and possible futures. The conclusion of the cosmic war marked not an ending but a beginning, the establishment of conditions under which human history and culture could unfold. With the Olympians victorious and a stable divine hierarchy in place, attention could turn from cosmic struggle to the complex dance of divine-mortal relations that would define Greek religious experience. This transition from mythic prehistory to historical time was never absolute. The repercussions of the Titanomachy continued to shape cosmic affairs long after Zeus consolidated his rule. Imprisoned titans occasionally stirred in their Tartarian confinement, causing earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Divine children with Titan heritage, like Hecate, Helios, or Selene, maintained connections to the older cosmic order while operating within the new Olympian framework. The wounds of cosmic violence left scars that never entirely healed. Yet the establishment of Olympian governance created space for a different kind of cosmic development. Not the violent overthrow of one divine generation by another, but the gradual unfolding of potential already present within the established order. This development occurred through multiple channels. The emergence of new deities, the evolution of divine-mortal relationships, the creation of heroes and demigods, and the increasing complexity of cosmic law. The birth of Athena represents this new mode of divine generation in its most dramatic form. Rather than emerging through sexual reproduction, the pattern that had produced both the Titans and the first Olympians, or through parthenogenesis, as Gaia had produced Uranus, Athena emerged fully formed from Zeus' head after he had swallowed her pregnant mother Metis. This unusual birth represented a new synthesis, the feminine wisdom of Metis integrated into masculine authority, intelligence made manifest through power rather than in opposition to it. Similarly, the birth of Dionysus, first from the union of Zeus and the mortal woman Semele, then from Zeus' own thigh after Semele's death, represented a new form of divine manifestation. Neither fully Olympian nor merely heroic, Dionysus embodied divine presence that could be directly experienced through ecstatic ritual rather than merely acknowledged through traditional worship. His nature as a god who had known mortal death made him a bridge between realms, an emblem of transformation, and a divine patron of boundary-crossing experience. These new divine births did not challenge the fundamental Olympian hierarchy established after the Titanomachy. Zeus remained supreme, his thunderbolts still the ultimate cosmic weapons. His will still the final authority in divine affairs. But within that stable framework, new manifestations of divinity became possible, forms that responded to emerging human needs and experiences rather than merely continuing established cosmic patterns. This capacity for evolution without revolution distinguished the Olympian regime from its predecessors. Where Uranus had resisted all change, imprisoning his children to prevent any alteration of his sole authority, and where Kronos had merely inverted his father's pattern through a different form of suppression, Zeus established a cosmic order flexible enough to incorporate novelty without losing its essential structure. This flexibility extended to relationships between divine and mortal realms as well. The Olympians, unlike the Titans before them, took active interest in human affairs, sometimes constructively, sometimes destructively, but always significantly. They sired children with mortals, creating the hybrid category of heroes who could achieve what neither ordinary humans nor full gods could accomplish. They established worship patterns that created reciprocal bonds between human communities and specific deities. They intervened in human conflicts according to their individual preferences and spheres of influence. Most importantly, they established what might be called a cosmic legal system, a set of principles governing interactions between immortals and mortals. Zeus became the special guardian of oaths, hospitality, and suppliant rights. Violations of these principles, whether by humans or lesser immortals, typically provoked divine retribution. Even Zeus himself, though sovereign, operated within these constraints. His authority absolute but not arbitrary, supreme but not unstructured. This legal dimension of cosmic governance appears in myths like that of Lycaon, the king who served human flesh to Zeus as a test of his divinity and was transformed into a wolf as punishment. It surfaces in the story of Ixion, who violated guest-host relations by attempting to seduce Zeus' wife Hera and suffered eternal torment in Tartarus as a consequence. It manifests in tales of cities destroyed by divine wrath after their leaders disregarded proper ritual obligations or ethical boundaries. Yet the same system that punished transgression also rewarded virtue. Mortals who demonstrated exceptional piety might receive divine favor, protection, or miraculous intervention. Those who maintained temple worship and observed proper sacrificial practices could expect general benevolence from their patron deities. Heroes who used their semi-divine gifts in service of cosmic order rather than personal aggrandizement might achieve extraordinary accomplishments or even, in rare cases, immortality. This balance of incentives and punishments created a cosmic environment where human agency remained real and significant despite the overwhelming power differential between gods and mortals. Unlike the pre-Olympian cosmos, where lesser beings existed merely at the whim of greater ones, the world established after the Titanomachy allowed for meaningful moral choice and consequence at all levels of creation. The warfare between Olympians and Titans thus established not merely a new ruling dynasty but a new mode of cosmic operation, one in which multiple forms of power could coexist in dynamic relationship, in which boundaries remained clear but not impermeable, in which diversity of function enhanced rather than threatened overall coherence. This settlement provided the mythic foundation for Greek culture's remarkable balance of unity and multiplicity, tradition and innovation, reverence and inquiry. Perhaps the most striking feature of this cosmic settlement was its open-endedness. Unlike many creation myths that present a completed universe with fixed features, the Greek tradition emerging from the Titanomachy portrayed a cosmos still in process, still generative, still capable of producing new divine and heroic figures, still responsive to changing conditions and needs. The war itself was decisive, but the peace that followed remained creative rather than merely static. This conceptual achievement, imagining cosmic order as both stable and dynamic, both structured and creative, represents one of Greek mythology's most significant contributions to human thought. By portraying divine power as organized yet plural, absolute yet distributed, it established intellectual foundations for later developments in political theory, theology, and scientific understanding. The cosmos that emerged from the Titanomachy served as a model for comprehending complexity without either reducing it to rigid uniformity or surrendering to formless chaos. The Titanomachy also established a mythic framework for understanding revolutionary change that has influenced Western thought for millennia. By portraying cosmic revolution as necessary yet traumatic, as both liberation from oppression and disruption of order, it provided conceptual tools for navigating the perennial human experience of social and political transformation. Zeus' victory over Kronos became a template for thinking about justified rebellion, about the ethics of power transfer, about the relationship between revolutionary means and ends. This framework appears with particular clarity in Hesiod's presentation of successive metallic ages: gold, silver, bronze, heroic, and iron, each representing a decline from its predecessor yet each also embodying distinct values and possibilities. Rather than portraying cosmic history as either pure progress or pure degeneration, this model suggests a complex interplay of loss and gain across time, of new potentials emerging alongside the fade-out of older forms. Each age possesses its own integrity while participating in larger patterns of cosmic development. The complexity of this historical vision distinguishes Greek mythic tradition from simpler narratives of Paradise Lost or primitive Golden Age. While elements of nostalgia for earlier cosmic periods appear in various myths, the overall tradition maintains a nuanced perspective on change, recognizing the real costs of transition while acknowledging the necessity and value of cosmic evolution. The Olympian victory is portrayed as both violent disruption and essential progress, an ambivalence that reflects mature engagement with the nature of historical transformation. This mythic wisdom about the paradoxes of change may represent the most enduring legacy of the Titanomachy narrative. By refusing both naive progressivism and reflexive conservatism, the Greek tradition established conceptual space for genuinely complex thinking about time, power, and cosmic order. It recognized that genuine innovation requires not merely modification but transformation, that new possibilities emerge through struggle rather than smooth transition, that creation and destruction remain perpetually intertwined in the ongoing life of the cosmos. In an age of accelerating change and disruption, this ancient wisdom takes on renewed relevance. As human societies confront ecological, technological, and social transformations comparable in scale to mythic upheavals, the patterns established in the Titanomachy provide resources for navigating the turbulence of transition. They suggest that viable futures emerge not through either rigid resistance to change or uncritical surrender to it, but through active engagement with transformative forces combined with commitment to enduring values. Zeus' triumph over Kronos offers no simple template for contemporary challenges, no direct answers to modern questions. But in its complex portrayal of cosmic conflict and resolution, in its vision of order emerging from struggle, in its recognition of both the necessity and the trauma of fundamental change, it continues to illuminate aspects of human experience that resist reduction to either pure conceptual abstractions or mere empirical facts. The power of the myth lies precisely in its capacity to hold together elements that logical analysis would separate: the personal and the cosmic, the political and the psychological, the ethical and the natural. The Titanomachy is simultaneously a story about family conflict, about political revolution, about generational transition, about the emergence of lawfulness from chaos, about the relationship between violence and justice. Its multiple dimensions allow it to address human experience in its full complexity rather than in artificially isolated domains. This multidimensional quality helps explain why the myth has remained generative across centuries and cultures. Artists, poets, philosophers, and ordinary individuals have continued to find in it resources for making sense of their own experiences of conflict, power, and transformation. The cosmic war becomes a metaphor for internal psychological struggles, for historical changes witnessed or experienced, for philosophical problems of order and chaos, for theological questions about divine justice and power. Such metaphorical extensions do not represent misuse or misunderstanding of the original myth, but activation of potentials already present within it. The Greek mythic tradition itself established this pattern of multiple interpretations existing in parallel: literal and allegorical, religious and philosophical, artistic and political understandings developing simultaneously rather than in opposition to each other. The cosmos that emerged from the Titanomachy contained space for multiple modes of truth, multiple forms of understanding, multiple approaches to meaning. This pluralism without relativism, this capacity to acknowledge diverse perspectives without surrendering the concept of truth itself, represents another enduring legacy of the Greek mythic framework established through the Titanomachy narrative. By portraying a cosmos governed by multiple divine wills in complex relationship rather than by either a single absolute authority or mere chaotic conflict, it created conceptual foundations for epistemological as well as political pluralism. The Olympian settlement thus stands as a mythic charter for intellectual as well as cosmic diversity, for a world in which different domains of experience operate according to their own principles while participating in larger patterns of coherence and meaning. Zeus' allocation of distinct provinces to different deities, his management of divine conflicts through counsel rather than decree, his balancing of central authority with distributed power, all these mythic patterns established frameworks for conceptualizing complexity that later intellectual traditions would develop in more explicitly theoretical terms. Yet theory alone cannot capture the full significance of the Titanomachy and its aftermath. The emotional and spiritual dimensions of these myths, their engagement with primal human experiences of fear, wonder, power, and transformation, give them a resonance that purely conceptual formulations lack. When thunderstorms shake the earth, something in human consciousness still responds with ancient recognition. When social orders collapse and new possibilities emerge from the ruins, the pattern feels familiar even to those who have never consciously studied Greek mythology. This recognition speaks to the enduring psychological truth of the myths, their capacity to externalize and organize internal human experiences that might otherwise remain formless or overwhelming. The conflicts of cosmic generations give shape to the ambivalence of children toward parents, to the anxieties of succession and inheritance, to the mixture of gratitude and resentment that characterizes generational relationships. The imprisonment of the Titans in Tartarus symbolizes the psychological need to contain destructive impulses without pretending they do not exist. Zeus' complex leadership style, authoritative without being purely authoritarian, powerful without being merely domineering, models integration of strength and wisdom, of force and restraint. These psychological dimensions do not reduce the myths to mere projections of human consciousness onto cosmic reality. Rather, they reflect the Greek intuition that cosmos and psyche share fundamental patterns, that the ordering of external reality and the structuring of internal experience follow parallel rather than opposed principles. The Olympian victory establishes harmony not by eliminating all conflict but by organizing it into creative tensions, by balancing opposing forces rather than allowing any single principle to achieve total dominance. This vision of cosmic harmony as dynamic balance rather than static perfection distinguishes Greek mythic wisdom from many other ancient and modern conceptual frameworks. It acknowledges the reality of conflict without surrendering to pure contest. It recognizes the necessity of hierarchy without idealizing absolute authority. It affirms the value of freedom without pretending that all constraints can or should be eliminated. The cosmos that emerges from the Titanomachy is neither utopia nor dystopia, but a complex reality in which both danger and opportunity, both limitation and possibility remain perpetually present. Such complexity resists reduction to simple moral lessons or conceptual abstractions. The myths of the Titanomachy offer no formulaic solutions to perennial human problems, no direct prescriptions for individual or collective life. Their wisdom emerges not through explicit doctrine but through narrative patterns that invite ongoing interpretation and application, through symbolic configurations that illuminate experience without confining it to predetermined categories. This open-endedness, this refusal of premature closure or artificial simplicity, represents perhaps the most valuable aspect of Greek mythic tradition for contemporary engagement. In a cultural environment often characterized by polarization, by pressure to adopt all-encompassing ideological frameworks, by impatience with ambiguity or paradox, the complexity of these ancient narratives offers a different mode of sense-making, one that accommodates rather than erases the genuine tensions of human experience. The Titanomachy reminds us that cosmic order emerges through struggle rather than divine fiat, that change involves both gain and loss, that power brings both opportunity and temptation, that wisdom requires both innovation and preservation. It suggests that the most enduring settlements are those that incorporate rather than merely suppress opposing forces, that the healthiest systems maintain creative tension rather than artificial harmony, that the most profound understanding embraces complexity rather than retreating to false simplicity. In this ancient wisdom lies an orientation toward reality that continues to offer guidance amid contemporary turbulence and transition. The myths of cosmic war and divine succession provide not escape from present challenges but resources for engaging them with greater awareness of their historical and psychological dimensions. They connect current struggles to perennial human experiences of transformation, power, and meaning-making, not to minimize their specificity but to illuminate their deeper patterns and possibilities. As the 21st century unfolds with unprecedented rates of technological, social, and ecological change, the mythic framework established through the Titanomachy narrative offers perspective that neither romanticizes the past nor worships the future, that neither denies the reality of power nor accepts its current configurations as inevitable or final. It suggests that viable futures emerge not through either pure conservation or pure revolution, but through processes that transform existing structures while preserving essential values and insights. The Olympian settlement, established through conflict yet oriented toward stability, achieved through revolution yet resistant to endless overthrow, violent in its methods yet ultimately directed toward harmony, offers a model of change that acknowledges its costs without surrendering its necessity. Zeus' victory over Kronos represents not the end of cosmic history but the establishment of conditions under which more nuanced, less catastrophic forms of development become possible. Perhaps this transition from revolutionary rupture to evolutionary process represents the most significant legacy of the Titanomachy for contemporary concerns. It suggests that after periods of radical transformation, the essential task becomes establishing frameworks within which ongoing change can occur without continuous devastation. Systems flexible enough to accommodate new realities, but stable enough to enable flourishing rather than mere survival. The mythic imagination that envisioned cosmic warfare followed by divine settlement continues to illuminate human experience precisely because it refuses false resolution of genuine tensions, because it acknowledges both the necessity of order and the reality of conflict, because it maintains awareness of cosmic violence without surrendering to despair about the possibility of meaning. In the space between naive optimism and cynical despair, between rigid traditionalism and rootless innovation, Between uncritical acceptance and reflexive rejection of inherited wisdom, the Greek mythic tradition continues to offer orientation for the ongoing human project of making sense of ourselves and our place in the cosmos. When thunder shakes the summer sky, when societal foundations tremble, when personal identities undergo transformation, the ancient patterns established in the Titanomachy narrative still provide frameworks for comprehending change without either minimizing its trauma or surrendering to its chaos. The cosmic war between generations of gods becomes a template for understanding both historical transitions and psychological development, both social revolutions and personal transformations. Its patterns illuminate the deep structure of change itself, its violence and creativity, its destruction and renewal, its continuities amid rupture. Beyond specific philosophical or psychological applications, the enduring power of the Titanomachy may lie simply in its affirmation that cosmic history has meaning, that the universe is neither a static hierarchy immune to transformation nor a chaotic void without pattern or purpose, but a realm in which genuine development occurs through conflict and resolution. This mythic insight, clothed in images of divine warfare and settlement, resonates with perennial human intuition that reality itself has a narrative structure, that existence unfolds through meaningful patterns rather than mere random succession. Whether approached through religious reverence, philosophical analysis, psychological exploration, artistic engagement, or simple narrative appreciation, the Titanomachy continues to offer wisdom about the nature of change, the dynamics of power, and the possibility of meaning amid conflict. Its ancient images of cosmic warfare and divine settlement provide perspective on contemporary experiences of transformation, not by offering simple answers or direct parallels, but by illuminating enduring patterns in the human relationship to order, change, and ultimate reality. In this sense, the myth remains alive not merely as cultural heritage or literary tradition but as a living resource for ongoing human sense-making. The Titanomachy still speaks to fundamental questions about how order emerges from chaos, how legitimate authority differs from mere domination, how creative conflict can be distinguished from purely destructive violence, how meaningful development occurs across time. Its answers come not in abstract propositions but in narrative patterns that engage imagination as well as intellect, emotion as well as analysis. The cosmos that emerges from these ancient stories, governed by divine powers in complex relationship, structured yet dynamic, ordered yet evolving, continues to offer an image of reality capacious enough to accommodate both human limitation and aspiration, both the constraints of existence and the possibilities of transformation. In a cultural moment often characterized by narrower visions, reducing reality to either pure determinism or pure construction, either blind mechanism or arbitrary will, the mythic framework established through the Titanomachy narrative maintains space for genuine wonder alongside rigorous understanding. This capacity to hold together elements that analytical thinking often separates, wonder and reason, structure and freedom, continuity and change, represents the enduring gift of Greek mythic tradition to contemporary consciousness. The Titanomachy remains relevant not despite but because of its refusal of artificial simplicity, its insistence on cosmic complexity, its recognition that order emerges through rather than against the reality of conflict and transformation. In the final analysis, perhaps the most profound insight embedded in this ancient narrative is its suggestion that meaning itself emerges through struggle, that cosmos does not descend complete from transcendent realms, but develops through the interaction of opposing forces within reality. The divine war that reshaped existence becomes a template for understanding all significant development, all genuine creation, all transformative change as processes that involve both destruction and renewal, both loss and discovery, both ending and beginning. This wisdom about the paradoxical nature of transformation, its simultaneous creativity and violence, its capacity to both fulfill and disrupt existing patterns, continues to illuminate human experience in all its dimensions. The Titanomachy endures as mythic truth precisely because it refuses easy consolation or simplification, because it acknowledges the genuine costs of change while affirming its necessity and value, because it recognizes both the trauma of cosmic violence and the possibility of meaningful resolution. In a world increasingly characterized by accelerating change and disruption, by the collapse of traditional structures and the emergence of new possibilities and dangers, this ancient mythic wisdom takes on renewed relevance. It offers neither nostalgic retreat to imagined golden ages nor uncritical embrace of novelty for its own sake, but a nuanced understanding of transformation as both breaking and making, both ending and beginning, both wound and healing. The cosmic war between divine generations becomes a lens for comprehending our own experiences of profound change, personal, cultural, ecological, technological, without either minimizing their difficulty or surrendering to despair about their meaning. The endurance of the Titanomachy narrative across millennia testifies to its capacity to address perennial human concerns about order, power, change, and meaning. Its images of cosmic warfare and divine settlement continue to resonate because they externalize and organize experiences that otherwise might remain formless or overwhelming. Experiences of generational conflict, revolutionary upheaval, ethical ambiguity, and the ongoing struggle to find harmony amid tension. Ultimately, the Titanomachy does not merely recount the origins of gods and cosmos, but serves as a mirror reflecting our own endless cycles of challenge and adaptation, order and chaos, destruction and creation. It reassures us that even in moments of profound upheaval, there is the potential for renewal and new beginnings. Just as Zeus forged a stable cosmos from the ruins of his father's reign, we too possess the capacity to shape meaning and coherence from our experiences of disorder and conflict. And so, as the ancient story reaches its close, we find ourselves back where all true myth inevitably brings us. Not in distant realms of gods alone, but here within ourselves, confronting our own capacities and limitations, our fears and hopes. The cosmic drama of the Titanomachy reminds us that transformation is not a single event but an ongoing process, woven into the very fabric of existence itself. In recognizing ourselves within these mythic patterns, we participate once again in the timeless human quest for understanding. For though the Olympian gods may no longer walk visibly among us, their story continues in the ongoing human journey, one where each generation must wrestle anew with the legacy of its predecessors, balancing reverence for the past with openness to the future, and embracing the ever-present potential for meaningful change. Thus, beneath the endless sky first ruled by Uranus, then by Kronos, and finally by Zeus, we too carry forward the story begun in chaos, shaped by conflict, and sustained by the enduring hope that from even the greatest upheaval, new order and meaning can emerge.